So in 2026, the United States aimed its geopolitical wrecking ball at two drastically different allies.
Right. Very different.
Yeah. I mean, one is this tiny, frozen, autonomous island with roughly, what, 57,000 people.
Exactly.
And the other is America's largest trading partner. They share the longest undefended border in the world.
Hmm.
But strangely enough, the U.S. is using the exact same playbook on both of them. So welcome to today's deep dive.
It really is a massive shift.
It is. And today, you, the listener, are getting a shortcut to understanding these complex geopolitical shifts happening right now in the summer of 2026.
Yeah, you're getting a front row seat to how two very different nations are basically having their structural beams tested.
Exactly. Tested to see exactly where they crack.
Because it's a phenomenal real-time stress test of global alliances.
Mm-hmm.
And it fundamentally challenges how we even think about international partnerships today.
For sure. So to do this, we are unpacking a core document today. It's a paper published just days ago, right? July 25th, 2026, in the Global Review.
Yes, by Dr. Fareed Novin.
Right. Titled Two Middle Powers Under Pressure. And before we get into the weeds here, I do need to clarify something for you, the listener.
Yeah, this is important.
Right. So before we unpack this, it's vital to note that our sources today discuss politically charged real-world events involving the current U.S. administration, as well as leadership in Canada and Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission is strictly to report impartially on the content and analysis provided in Dr. Novin's paper. We are not endorsing any viewpoints, taking political sides, or judging the policies discussed.
Exactly.
We are simply here to help you explore the strategic ideas exactly as they are laid out in the original text.
And the central thesis that Dr. Novin lays out is, it's incredibly compelling because it demands that we look past the daily news cycle.
Oh, totally.
He argues that what might look to, the untrained eye like a series of isolated kind of unpredictable diplomatic spats between the U.S. and these two countries.
Yeah.
They're actually part of a single, highly calculated, coercive pattern. Yeah, it's a deliberate strategy that combines sovereignty pressure with trade leverage.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today is to explore Dr. Novin's Bayesian game theoretic assessment, which
sounds like a lot.
it sounds like a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Before anyone glazes over, it is basically a mathematical way to look at how nations update their strategies based on actual actions rather than just loud rhetoric.
Right, actions over words.
Right. But to understand the fragmentation happening globally right now, we have to look at why these two radically different nations are facing this identical playbook.
Yeah, let's look at the comparison because it's stark.
It really is. On one hand, you have Denmark. It's this compact Nordic kingdom, population of about 6 million, and they are firmly shielded by the European Union.
Right. And then on the other hand, you have Canada, which is this vast, resource-rich continental federation.
Right. Huge difference in size.
Huge. And Canada's economy and geography are tied inextricably to the United States. They don't just trade with the U.S. Their supply chains are deeply integrated.
Yeah, completely enmeshed. But despite those massive structural differences, since early 2025, both nations have found themselves in the crosshairs of a U.S. president openly questioning their territorial or political status.
Mm-hmm.
And both have been hit with really aggressive economic threats.
Right. And Dr. Novin identifies a very specific underlying rhythm to this pressure. It isn't random at all.
It's not just a tantrum.
No. It operates in this continuous, predictable loop. It goes escalation, followed by allied or domestic pushback, then a partial reversal or de-escalation by the U.S.
Okay.
And finally, a rhetorical revival of that exact same threat at the next politically convenient moment.
It's like dealing with an unpredictable business partner, You think you've resolved a dispute because you made a concession, but the underlying dynamic hasn't changed at all.
Exactly. The pressure just reemerges later, maybe from a slightly different angle. It's a cycle.
Right. And the hard lesson Dr. Novin points out here is that conciliation just doesn't work. It doesn't break the cycle.
It really doesn't. A conciliatory signal from the target country does not lower the coercing government's propensity to escalate again in the future.
Which is wild to think about.
It is, but the pressure serves a domestic political utility back in the U.S., right? Which means it operates completely independently of what Canada or Denmark actually does to appease them.
And we have concrete examples of this failing, right? Like in August 2025.
Oh,
The newly elected Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made this massive de-escalation gesture.
right. He removed most of Canada's retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods,
Yeah, goods that were compliant with the USMCA, the trade agreement. It was this huge olive branch.
which was a move heavily criticized domestically, by the way. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called it a flat-out capitulation.
Right. But more importantly, looking at the whole geopolitical board, did that olive branch buy Canada lasting peace?
Not at all. Not even close. The frictions continued right through the fall and into 2026.
And Denmark tried to play nice, too. I mean, they committed heavily to visible NATO spending.
Right, they really stepped up.
Yeah, they led that massive multinational deterrent military presence called Operation Arctic Endurance in January 2026.
Mm-hmm.
They put ships in the water, planes in the air, just to prove they were carrying their weight in the alliance. Did that stop the territorial threats?
It did not. The sovereignty pressure came right back, which kind of brings us to how this pressure actually lands.
Right.
Because even though they're facing the exact same cycle, the impact feels drastically different for each country. It's all based on their structural vulnerabilities.
Yeah, the paper talks about Denmark having mediated vulnerability. What does that mean?
So the pressure point for Denmark isn't metropolitan Copenhagen, it's Greenland.
Right, the island.
Yeah, it's an autonomous territory of Denmark,
No.
population of just 57,000, but geographically massive and sitting on some of the world's largest untapped rare earth deposits.
And this isn't even a new obsession for the U.S., right? Like, didn't President Truman actually try to buy Greenland back in 1946?
He did. Yeah, it's a long-standing strategic interest. Fast forward to early January 2026, and the crisis escalated sharply when the current administration literally wouldn't rule out the use of force to acquire the territory.
Which is just crazy, and that triggered those historic hands-off Greenland protests in the capital, Nuuk, right, on January 17th?
Yes, a quarter of the entire population took to the streets.
Wow, a quarter. But then comes the reversal part of the cycle, right? Just a few days later, on January 21st, at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Exactly. The U.S. reversed course. They explicitly pledged not to use force or tariffs to acquire Greenland.
So big sigh of relief. The pressure vanished as quickly as it appeared.
But then the revival happens.
Of course.
July 8th, 2026, at the NATO summit in Ankara. Out of nowhere, the U.S. revives the claim.
Right.
They state that Greenland should be controlled by the United States, arguing that Denmark underinvests in its security.
It's just whiplash. But we have to look at why Denmark survives this whiplash. You were saying their vulnerability is mediated or, like, buffered?
Buffered. Because Denmark's metropolitan economy, its core trade, is mostly conducted within the massive common market of the EU.
Ah, right, the 27 member states.
Exactly. So the Greenland dispute is a severe constitutional and security headache for Copenhagen, absolutely.
Yeah.
But they can absorb that territorial pressure without their core domestic economy collapsing.
They had a shield.
They have a massive shield.
Now contrast that with Canada.
Yeah, totally different story.
Because Canada has direct vulnerability. The pressure point isn't a remote, thinly populated territory. The pressure point is the Canadian mainland itself.
Right.
Because roughly 75% of Canadian merchandise exports go to a single market, the United States.
75%.
Yeah.
And the rhetoric targets the nation as a whole. I mean, we saw the constant 51st state rhetoric begin in January 2025.
Oh, yeah.
And it resurfaces alongside these seemingly bizarre bilateral frictions, like fights over a border bridge or, wildfire smoke drifting south.
Right, the wildfire smoke.
Yeah, it all contributes to this atmosphere of conditional sovereignty.
And the real hit, like the actual stress test on the concrete, came this summer, July 1st, 2026.
Mm-hmm. The mandatory 6-year review of the USMCA trade agreement.
Right, and this was supposed to be a standard procedure. Canada and Mexico wanted to extend the trade pact cleanly for another 16 years to guarantee market stability.
But the U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer, simply declined to renew it in its current form.
Just declined it.
Yeah.
So now, instead of 16 years of stability, the entire North American economy is dumped into this chaotic, unpredictable annual review cycle.
And then weeks later, on July 20th and 21st, the U.S. administration drops the hammer.
The big one.
Yeah, they impose 50% tariffs under a rarely used statute, Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930.
Okay, let's pause on that because it is just wild. The Tariff Act of 1930 is the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariff law.
Right, the one historians argue worsened the Great Depression.
Yes. And Section 338 is basically this dormant weapon that allows the president to slap massive punitive duties on any country they feel is discriminating against U.S. commerce.
Totally bypassing modern organizations like the
No.
WTO.
Completely. They use this ancient sledgehammer to hit roughly $20 billion of Canadian goods, mostly alcohol and dairy, citing discriminatory treatment. Wait, so
Right.
Denmark gets a buffer because the pressure is focused on a remote territory and they have the EU trade bloc, but Canada is taking direct hits right to its metropolitan economy.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how this highlights the concept of structural asymmetry perfectly.
Okay.
Canada has no EU equivalent to hide behind. The defense has to be built bilaterally, and they just have to absorb the shock directly into their domestic economy.
Wow. But they do have cards to play, right? I mean, this is where Dr. Noven's analysis pivots from describing the damage to actually finding the leverage.
Yes, and this is crucial. Because Canada is taking these direct hits, we have to look incredibly closely at exactly where the U.S. is aiming those tariffs.
Right.
And crucially, where it is not aiming them.
The exemptions,
Yeah.
the quiet parts of the policy.
Exactly, the exemptions. The July 20th tariffs hit alcohol and dairy, which are highly sensitive political targets in Canada due to their supply management system. But look at the explicit exemptions from these 50% duties. Energy, potash, critical minerals, fish, autos, lumber, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and aircraft.
That is a massive list.
They specifically left all of those vital sectors untouched.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. It's like a burglar breaks into your house to send a message, right?
Okay, I like this.
They go into the dining room, they violently smash all your cheap plates, they knock over the chairs, but they carefully, meticulously step right around your priceless Ming vase.
Right, right.
Why? Because they actually need to steal it intact later.
Exactly. The U.S. is loudly smashing the plates to cause political pain, but they are purposely protecting the strategic supply chains they fundamentally rely on.
That makes so much sense.
And this is where Dr. Noven introduces the Bayesian framework we mentioned earlier. It's simply a game-theoretic approach to statecraft.
Okay, lay it on us.
Specifically, he uses the Bayesian updating equation. It's the probability of a hypothesis given the evidence, or P of H given E.
Wait, P of H given E, in plain English, you're saying every time the U.S. does something new, Canada shouldn't panic. They should just plug that action into a formula to predict what the U.S. will do next.
Yes. Bringing it back to your burglar metaphor.
Yeah.
If the burglar spares the Ming vase, that is your new evidence, the E.
Okay.
Because of that evidence, the probability of them returning to negotiate for that vase, your hypothesis, or H, just went up to 99%.
Ah, so you don't react emotionally to the smashed plates.
Yeah.
You use the spared vase to update your understanding of what the burglar actually values.
Precisely. You don't overreact to the loud rhetoric. You look at the hard actions.
Fascinating.
The exemptions are the strongest Bayesian signal in this entire saga. The rhetoric, like the 51st state comments or the threats about Greenland, it's all very loud and provocative.
Yeah.
But the actual actions, carefully exempting energy, potash, and critical minerals, they reveal true U.S. preferences and dependencies far more reliably than a fiery speech at a summit.
Because if the U.S. really wanted to economically crush Canada, they would tariff the energy sector, right?
But they can't. It would spike inflation and cripple their own industries. So the signal is very clear. We want to cause pain for political leverage, but not at the cost of our own critical supply chains.
So if leaders in Ottawa and Copenhagen apply this Bayesian updating, it fundamentally changes what they do next.
It absolutely does. It shifts the probabilities of different future scenarios.
And Dr. Noven updates these in the paper, right? He runs these scenarios out to 2030.
Yes, and the data clearly shifted after the July 2026 tariffs. The best case scenario, what he calls adaptive continental resilience, basically where things stay manageable and friendly, that probability dropped to 35%.
Ouch.
Yeah. Meanwhile, persistent North American trade friction, which means this aggressive cyclical tariff warfare, is just the new normal that jumped to 32%.
Almost equal probability now.
Exactly. And we also can't ignore that the worst case scenario, severe continental disruption, where the trade agreement breaks down entirely and supply chains sever, that ticked up to 5%.
5%. I mean, it's a low probability, but the fact that it's rising based on this new evidence is a massive warning light for policymakers.
It's a huge red flag.
So what does this all mean for what these countries actually do right now? Especially Canada, which, as we established, doesn't have Denmark's EU shield.
Right.
They are facing this new normal with some serious domestic constraints.
The domestic foundations matter immensely when you're under geopolitical pressure.
Yeah.
Denmark enters this period of coercion with a highly disciplined, low-debt fiscal position. They have the fiscal space to fund expensive military operations like Arctic Endurance without breaking the bank.
But Canada is in a much tighter spot.
Very tight.
I mean, they have an aging population draining healthcare and pension resources. They have rising federal and provincial debt and a persistent productivity gap compared to the U.S.
And the domestic politics are a total powder keg.
Completely. Prime Minister Mark Carney came in April 2025 on this whole elbows up platform, right? Calling the July tariffs a threat to sovereignty.
Yes. But his actual policy response was to pivot to, quote, intensified talks.
Which leaves him incredibly exposed politically.
Oh, massively.
Oh.
You have conservative leader Pierre Poilievre hammering him for past climb downs, essentially saying talks don't work.
Right.
And then you have provincial leaders like Ontario Premier Doug Ford, whose manufacturing base is getting squeezed by all this uncertainty, and he's demanding immediate dollar-for-dollar retaliation.
The internal political pressure to just lash out emotionally is immense.
It is, which is exactly why Dr. Novin doesn't just diagnose the problem, he lays out a strategic playbook for Canada.
Right, this is the practical part.
It's all about shifting from ad hoc, emotional reactions to structural resilience. And if we look at his 6 points, they really fall into 3 distinct categories.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first category is basically getting their own internal house in order. That covers his recommendations to maintain fiscal sustainability and to complete the internal economic union.
Right. Because if you are drowning in debt, you simply cannot absorb multi-billion-dollar tariff shocks.
Exactly. But completing the internal economic union is perhaps the most vital domestic step.
Explain why that internal union matters so much. Like, what's broken?
Well, Canada has notorious interprovincial trade barriers.
Oh, right.
Yeah, mismatched regulations make it incredibly difficult to move certain goods, professionals, or services across provincial lines.
That seems so counterintuitive for a single country.
It is. If a business in British Columbia can't easily trade with a business in Alberta due to red tape, the national economy is fundamentally weakened. You have to fix your own internal trade barriers, so your domestic market can act as a shock absorber when external trade with Washington is disrupted.
Okay, that makes sense. The second theme of his playbook is about offensive leverage.
Yes. This is where Canada stops playing defense and starts using that Bayesian signal we talked about earlier.
Right, the Ming vase. Dr. Novin says Canada must convert those tariff exemptions into leverage and diversify their trade.
Exactly. Let's look at critical minerals as an example. The U.S. exempted them because they desperately need them for batteries and tech.
Right.
Well, Canada's traditional move is to dig those minerals out of the ground and export them raw. Converting that to leverage means investing aggressively in processing those minerals at home.
Build the battery plants in Canada.
Exactly. Force the U.S. auto industry to rely on Canadian finished goods, not just raw materials. You take the Ming vase and you make sure you are the only one who knows how to polish it.
I love that. You turn a defensive exemption into an active strategic asset.
Precisely. And simultaneously, you push harder into the EU and the Indo-Pacific so you aren't 75% reliant on a partner who keeps testing your structural beams.
Smart. The final theme is adopting an institutional mindset. Dr. Novin recommends creating a standing strategic foresight function and preserving optionality on retaliation.
Yes. Instead of scrambling every time a new tariff drops, build a dedicated government department whose entire job is to do this Bayesian updating.
Like a dedicated team just crunching the E's and H's.
Exactly. Monitor the actions, crunch the probabilities, and plan for the scenarios. And regarding retaliation, don't just react in the moment under political pressure from premiers demanding dollar-for-dollar strikes.
Right, because that's emotional.
Pre-agree on a calibrated, targeted retaliation framework with the provinces before the next shock even hits.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about a paradigm shift.
It really is.
Canada needs to stop reacting to every single shock as if it's an isolated, surprising crisis. They have to stop hoping the unpredictable partner will suddenly wake up and become predictable again.
The era of assuming a clean, stable alliance based purely on historical goodwill is over.
Yeah.
The new reality is recurring, calculated coercion. The only rational response is continuous updating and building the internal capacity to weather a wide range of futures.
It's all about recognizing the pattern. I mean, geopolitical posturing is incredibly loud. The headlines are full of threats, territorial grabs, massive tariff numbers.
Yep.
But the truth, the actual strategy, is found in the quiet exemptions and the underlying data.
It's watching what they do with the Ming vase, not just listening to the noise of the breaking plates in the dining room.
Exactly. And that brings us to something I want you, the listener, to mull over on your own today.
Yeah, think about this.
Think about your own professional life, your career, or your business. We've spent this time talking about great powers and international trade, but the psychology here scales all the way down to a boardroom. Oh, absolutely.
If you are dealing with a volatile client, a difficult boss, or a partner who constantly cycles between conflict and accommodation, what is your strategy?
Are you just holding your breath?
Right. Are you just waiting for their next Davos reversal apology, hoping this time they really mean it and things will go back to normal?
Which, as we've seen, they won't.
Or are you applying Bayesian logic? Are you actively updating your probabilities based on their hard actions, building your own internal resilience, finding your own leverage points?
Are you watching what they actually do rather than what they loudly claim they're going to do?
Because whether it's a multi-billion-dollar trade dispute over critical minerals or just a tense negotiation for your next contract, you need to know exactly where your own structural fault lines are long before the other side decides to test them.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the underlying currents of 2026.
Thanks for having me.
Keep watching the actions, not the words. We'll catch you next time.